Hello, everyone, and welcome to another Wednesday drawing session with me, Frank Cho. There's my trusty Pentel mechanical pencil with zero point 0.7 HB millimeter lead, my needed eraser, and here's my favorite paper to draw on, Strathmore Bristol board, 300 series with vellum surface. Love the vellum surface. Today, I decided to go back to my comic book roots. I decided to draw Colossus from the X-Men. Now, I love Colossus. Actually, Colossus, Wolverine's my favorite X-Men character, and Colossus is up there. I think he's like my third, favorite character in the X-Men. So, um, with Colossus, you want to draw this big, hulking, muscular guy. I mean, Colossus has this really distinct look. He has this organic steel skin, this kind of like banded steel skin, and it's really great. I mean, I think I read somewhere Dave Cockrum actually is the creator of Colossus. I think he kind of like modified like an old character that he already had called Mr. Steel. And when he got called up to draw the X-Men, he already had Colossus already designed. He took his own character, Mr. Steel, and kind of modified it and created Colossus. So Colossus is always I've always enjoyed Colossus because again he's this kind of like a powerhouse of a guy, and has this metallic skin, and also if I remember correctly, Colossus was also he was kind of like an artist. I think that's what he did as a hobby. He was like a kind of like an amateur artist. So I thought that was really cool. Since I'm an artist, as a kid, you're an artist. You're like, oh, cool. I get to draw a superhero who's also an artist. So Colossus, his real name is Peter Rasputin, and apparently he is like a descendant of Rasputin, the mad monk of Russia from the turn of the century. So I thought that like I didn't really find that out until later, and when they revealed that Peter Peter Colossus was a direct descendant of Rasputin. So I thought that was kind of funny. So Peter has a sister who's also a mutant, and her name is Ileana Magic. That's her code name, Magic, and she's kind of like this, like a demon sorceress, which actually I really enjoyed drawing her too. Now think about it. Actually, more I think about it, I actually enjoyed drawing the X Men, like a lot of the characters from the X Men. Um, I guess I mean X Men always had like a special place in my heart because I remember X Men was one of the very first comic books that I bought with my own money as a kid. When you're a kid, I had to save up my lunch money to buy comics. So I remember buying my very first X-Men comic book that I bought was Uncanny X-Men number 166, art by Paul Smith and story by Chris Claremont. And so I remember I bought that, and my other comic book that I bought at roughly around the same time was Fantastic Four number 250 by John Byrne, story and art by John Byrne. Those two comic book I absolutely loved. So going back to Colossus, I've always enjoyed that character, Colossus, and I really love when Colossus would pick up Wolverine and kind of chuck him like a speedball. I think that's what they call that. They called it the speedball special, and Colossus would throw Wolverine like a baseball, and like this little, like a furry murder ball. So X-Men in the 80s, during my prime collecting period, I mean, X-Men was like one of my favorite comics of all time. And it's actually kind of funny. Later on, I pretty much had to give up on the X-Men when Chris Claremont, I guess, just started going kind of crazy and started doing all these like really convoluted complex story that just made no sense. It just became a mess. It just became like like a tangled mess. So I pretty much stopped reading X Men around like 220 around there. 210, 220, right around there. After Cyclops lost the leadership of the X Men. He got beaten by Storm in a fair combat, and then Storm became the new leader of the X Men, and Cyclops stepped down. So shortly after that, I kind of stopped reading the X Men because it started getting more and more confusing. So now Paul Smith was my X Men artist because I mean that's when I started collecting X Men right when he just started drawing it. I think Paul Smith started at X Men 165 and left 11 issues later, which I found that kind of odd. He had like the number one book on his hand, and he just like gave it all up and just like decided to walk the earth like Kane from Kung Fu or something like that. Just like gave it up and just walked away from the X Men, which is like kind of wild, you know. So anyway, I love Colossus. So Colossus had this, just everything about Colossus, is just so very visually distinct. So when I'm drawing Colossus, I think of him as a kind of like a almost like a classic bodybuilder, So he's just very muscular, very metallic, and like he's a powerhouse. And to draw Colossus, you want to put him in a very kind of like a power pose, which is like usually legs. He's standing in a wide stance and with his arm kind of cocked, ready to throw a punch. So that's the image I had in mind for Colossus. And with that image in mind, it's just a matter of just kind of transferring that image from your brain to the paper. Now, if you want to draw Colossus, you really have to know your anatomy because Colossus is completely his body is completely covered in this banded organic metal. So if you know your muscle grouping, it just makes the drawing that much easier. So right there, I'm trying to figure out how to draw that one hand. Um, yeah, kind of like. So if you're unsure about something, is always use reference. For me, I often pose myself, use my hand or whatever to figure things out. So yeah, drawing hands is a little tricky. If you really want to know how to draw hands, look at Neil Adams. Neil Adams is a master at drawing hands. So same with Jose Garcia Lopez. He was really good at drawing hands too. Actually, Cary Gamble was also good at drawing hands. And Albert Dorn, who was an illustrator, he actually was really did used to draw these very expressive hands. But when drawing hands, I often, if I get stuck, I would often just kind of like pose myself, or I would look at Neil Adams stuff, how he kind of like solved that problem. And so Colossus has that kind of like that bracelet. So another funny thing about Colossus is his real name is Peter Rasputin, and if I remember correctly, I think he is a direct descendant of of Rasputin, the mad monk, the Russian monk from the turn of the century. So I thought that was kind of funny, which makes sense because Ileana, Peter's little sister, she is a demon sorceress. So I guess you could kind of make that direct connection from the Rasputin, the Mad Monk, to Ilyana, magic character. Yeah, just decided to give him the extra kind of like beefy leg. Get that big old Tom Platz leg, you know. Colossus didn't skip leg days at the gym. Actually, it's kind of funny, like like just seeing Colossus right now. With the way that he's posed, he looked like a classic strongman, like a circus strongman. Just give him a big handlebar mustache, and he'll like fit right in. Well, like so, I was reading up on Colossus because I my knowledge of Colossus is from the 1980s through early 90s. So I really don't know too much about Colossus, and so I looked him up. And the more I read, I'm actually glad that I stopped reading around like X-Men, Uncanny X-Men, like 220, because it just it's like a crazy soap opera. It just becomes this convoluted, tangled mess. And I remember Peter Rasputin, Colossus, breaking up with Kitty Pride, because which kind of like, as a kid, like you're reading comics, and it was very soap opera-ish, and I was kind of bummed out by that. And I think Colossus hooked up with some alien chick, I think. So, like you do, in comic books, the characters always kind of hook up with some alien chick, kind of like Captain Kirk. So I decided to draw Colossus in that classic Dave Cockrum costume. So the thing about Dave Cockrum is you could tell right away when it's a Dave Cockrum costume, because he always has this kind of like this bodysuit with this kind of like a shoulder flare, and had these like big giant, almost like a pirate boots. The boots are have that kind of, has that fold in it, or it's like a mid thigh boot. Um, and if it's a female character, they always have like a sash around their waist. So that's a classic Dave Cockrum design. I mean, since I grew up reading, the Uncanny X Men in the early '80s, um, I decided to go with that classic costume from that time period. Another guy who draws really great Colossus, actually the guy who actually draws like great everything, is Arthur Adams. I think Arthur Adam is like when you look up in a dictionary, comic book artist, I often see Arthur Adams, because that guy, everything he draws is so, it for me it defines comic book. I mean, it's cartoony, is very cartoony and realistic at the same time. So Arthur Adam, just his stuff just always just, I get a great enjoyment out of it. And I love his X Men. Everything he draws about the X Men is great. I've seen his Colossus, and they're always, to me, they're just absolutely perfect. So I drew the boots, and I realized, if I remember correctly, Colossus boots were kind of, has that big flare, kind of the rectangular flare. I think it was kind of more mid thigh. It didn't really terminate at the knee. It actually kind of went up toward the mid thigh area. Again, unless I'm misremembering it. So I'm basically drawing this out of my memory, you know. So that's the funny part. So I used to just draw the 1980s Marvel characters constantly. I remember all the little costume details, and Colossus was one of them. I mean, Marvel during the 80s, during the Jim Shooter era. I mean, so many classic comic books from that storyline from that era. I really need to draw like one of my favorite things about Colossus and Wolverine is like when he throws Wolverine at the bad guys. I should draw that next. Have like the speedball special, Colossus just like chucking Wolverine right at you. Drawing the arm bracelet. There's that forearm. So if you look at the forearm, there's a scientific term. God, what is that? So it's basically top half and the bottom half are basically almost like a mirror image of each other. So like the human bicep is the hamstring on the leg, and the tricep in the arm is essentially the quad in the legs, and the calf is the same, very similar muscle grouping to the forearm grouping, and you have the wrist and the ankle, the hand and the feet. So you can kind of see a lot of the parallels. God, I forgot the term for that. That what's that science term? Yeah, that's gonna drive me nuts. I'm probably gonna remember it tonight when I'm right about to fall asleep. That word gonna pop in my mind and it's gonna just drive me nuts. Yeah, I'm not really sure how strong Colossus is. Now I think about it, Colossus always got his butt kicked. I think Juggernaut just like destroyed him all the time. And I think, yeah, I remember Colossus fighting the Gladiator during the Trial of Phoenix run. And the Gladiator just absolutely just demolished Colossus. Yeah. Now, so I got pretty much all the figure done. Just kind of like cleaning up some of the line work. And just kind of like, you know, reinforcing the line. And then now I'm started adding the kind of like the band around the organic metallic skin. So he has like this corded, segmented bands around his muscle groupings, which I thought was like really cool as a kid. When you saw that, as a man, this is a really cool design. And Dave Cockrum doesn't get enough credit. I thought his stuff was just fantastic. I think Dave Cockrum also designed a lot of the Legionnaires costume, or updated them for DC Comics. And so if you look at DC Comics, is it the Legionnaires? The Legion? I'm trying. I mean, like, I'm trying to think. I mean, it's like a lot of the comic creators would often jump companies, and they would do a bunch of work for different companies all the time. Like even Jack Kirby. Jack Kirby, he is the mastermind behind Marvel. He's the one that pretty much he's kind of like Babe Ruth. You know, like Babe Ruth. Yankee Stadium is the stadium Babe Ruth built. So it's very similar to Jack Kirby. So Jack Kirby basically built Marvel, the Marvel universe, and Stan Lee kind of put the polish on it. But ultimately, Jack Kirby was the ultimate creator in the for the of the Marvel universe. So back then, I'm still do today. A lot of the creators would jump ship, and I think Dave Cockrum did a bunch of work for DC too at one point. I mean, even John Byrne. John Byrne was Mr. Marvel back in the 80s, and then he jumped ship after Fantastic Four to revamp Superman, and that was like the. So I remember when John Byrne left Fantastic Four, and I love his Fantastic Four. I mean, Fantastic Four is to this day one of my favorite comic books of all time. So when he left Marvel, Fantastic Four to write and draw Superman, I actually followed him. I've always been a Marvel guy, but because of John Byrne, I actually went and picked up Superman. I really didn't read too much Superman growing up. I just didn't like the artwork. I mean, Kurt Swan, he was a Superman artist back then. He's a solid artist, but there's just nothing too exciting about his style, which is kind of funny, you know. But now, as a professional, I have more of an appreciation for Kurt Swan now. But I really didn't care for Kurt Swan growing up. Same with Jack Kirby. When I was a kid, I really didn't care for Jack Kirby's drawing because everything looked weird with that wiggly line and all that. But once I became an adult and a professional, I actually finally realized the genius of Jack Kirby. And so it's kind of funny, you know. As you get older, you kind of mellow out and you become more thoughtful, and you become, you know, more intelligent. You start seeing what the different artists are doing, their style, what they're bringing to the table, and all that. So you have like a greater appreciation for the artist as you get older. So it's actually kind of fascinating. So there I'm adding more segmented band. There's that quad. You know what's driving me crazy is like I went to nursing school. I have a nursing degree, and I remember I had to study anatomy a lot. And at one point, I used to know all the muscle grouping, all the muscle, all the names of all the muscle groups. Now, I mean, like if you don't use it, you lose it. I mean, that is so true. I can't remember what some of the muscles are called, which is kind of funny because I know how to draw muscle, which muscle goes where and all that, but I have trouble naming them, which is kind of funny. Just I'm reinforcing the lines. Cleaning up the line work, erasing strain marks. So Colossus had this like really cool banding around his hand. I'm not sure if you could see it, but he has this like these really unique design on his fingers and all that, which was again like another cool little detail that I remember as a kid. Just a little detail that kind of make everything work in comics. Now I'm started adding the that metallic sheen on the skin. The guy who did really beautiful metallic sheen on the skin was John Byrne. His run on the X Men was just awesome. So when you're drawing the sheen on something metallic, I like to do basically have like a rim light around the outer edge, and then in the middle you kind of keep that kind of like clean, and then so you basically shade the outer portion and the inner portion, so you keep the middle kind of like kind of clean. That's where the highlight goes. So we'll just kind of keep that in mind, and then you can kind of fake it. Just adding that metallic sheen. Yeah, just adding that the size. So Peter has this Colossus has this kind of like this like really cool flat top when it turns into the metallic form. Okay, like I'm actually now thinking about it. I think Colossus left the X Men and joined Excalibur. Um, yeah, if I'm yeah, he joined Excalibur, and I think he died. Man, it's been a while since I read that storyline. I think he died in the Excalibur book, if I remember correctly. Or am I misremembering it? I don't know. That's the problem with the X-Men book, because a lot of the X-Men stories are just so all over the map, and kind of really confusing at times. Especially when Chris Claremont started doing all these like time jumps, where all these like future characters from the future are coming into the past to change stuff and all that, and it just become unwieldy, yeah, and convoluted in my opinion, and it started kind of sucking the joy out of reading the X Men, when it just become just really crazy, the time jump storyline appeared, Now I think about it, I kind of want to go back and reread my Excalibur comic books, because I think Colossus and Kitty Pryde and Nightcrawler joined Excalibur group. Huh. So just kind of reinforcing the line. Just adding some simple shading. Now that's gonna bug me now. If no, he couldn't have died. If he died, why did they bring him back? Now that's gonna like drive me nuts now. Now I can't sleep. I'm gonna think about this. How he died and how he came back. That's just, that's the problem with comics. It's like when they kill off a character, they just magically bring the character back down the road, and it's just kind of, it drives me batty. I'm just kind of reinforcing the debris on the ground, and just adding some minor details, and there it is.